if you don't kind of enjoy or at least tolerate well balancing your checkbook, you're probably not going to be a good businessman unless you learn.
Nobody balances a checkbook anymore.
Well,
I hate to break
metaphorically
that to you.
speaking. I mean, keeping track.
Welcome to another episode of the Essential Craftsman Podcast. I'm Nate. I've got my dad here, the Essential Craftsman. How are you doing?
Good. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us.
We want to talk about spec houses today, but not in particular our spec house or the series, but just spec houses in general. We use the word spec a lot, and we haven't maybe defined it in a long time, but spec is short for speculation. So why don't you give the listeners maybe the 30-second overview of what a spec house is and sort of the groundwork.
A spec house is a house that you're building on speculation. That is, you're betting, you're gambling, you're rolling the dice that you can find a piece of ground, build a house on it that somebody else will like well enough and will have enough money to buy from you, that they will approve of the choices that you made about colors and textures and number of bedrooms and access, and that the market will be strong enough that there will be a buyer before you get tired of paying interest on the money you borrowed to build it, and you sell it and hope you make some money. That's a spec house.
Yeah, and it's used specifically at single houses, but I don't know why, because people build trailers on spec or whole subdivisions on spec. I mean, that's the concept behind building a subdivision. I'm going to develop these 30 houses
that's right.
and on speculation, but that's not a spec project. That's just a development, I guess.
Yeah.
But people will build like a trailer and then try to sell it, right?
As far as just manufacturing, you mean make something for sale on the open market?
Speculate, like, I'm going to build this and I think I can sell it for more, maybe a guitar.
Yeah.
I'm going to build this for, although that's maybe not realistic these days with how cheap you can get a good guitar.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you can take that all the way down to the donut shop, right? They are speculating that they're going to get up in the middle of the night and make donuts, and they'll be sold the next day before they get so stale they're junk.
Yeah.
So I guess it's retail. It's small-scale retail with houses as your product.
Yeah.
As compared to a custom home builder where you find a person that wants a house and probably has a plan, and you propose a price and a contract to them to build exactly what they want, exactly where they want it. And then the whole business aspect is how to provide what they want, get their approval as the project goes along, and at the end of the day, get your final payment that includes the profit that you made for providing that service. Yeah. So in that case, you're selling a service. In the other case, you're selling a house.
And in the case of a spec house, the money you're hoping to make is sort of made on risk. In other words, you're rolling the dice that yes, you'll be able to sell it, maybe even beyond your best case scenario, but you're taking the risk that maybe it won't sell for 2 years, and you're going to move into it or have to rent it out or go to some sort of plan B or C.
Yeah, that's right, because when you're building a house on speculation, there are holding costs. That house doesn't just sit there waiting to be purchased by someone without continuing to cost you money, or at least interest you're not making, as if savings actually paid interest anymore.
Yeah.
But holding costs are very real: taxes and insurance and interest and deterioration and. So it is a giant roll of the dice.
Yeah, and a house, it's not like making a meal, like maybe a fast food place makes a hamburger speculating somebody's going to walk in and buy it. Fine, probably they will. But think about, for example, right now with what happened over the course of 4 or 6 weeks in our economy, where people who are in the middle of a spec house, well, like us, are maybe having to, cross their fingers and toes a little tighter. That I hope there's still a buyer out there for this.
It's interesting. What, a year and a half ago or 2 years even, when we were showing you guys the plans of what we were going to build and talking about building a house on speculation, there were a couple guys saying, don't do it, the market's going to collapse. And we thought, well, yeah, maybe, but we've set our hand to the plow, there's no turning back. And as we were coming along, we were thinking, this thing's going to be done before the predictable economic downturn probably happens. But actually, that kind of got accelerated, so we'll see what this actually turns out to be.
It was a couple months ago, but there was a spec house built somewhere in LA, Beverly Hills, that I think was sold for like tens of millions of dollars. I want to say like $50 million.
Wow, nice house.
It was a spec house, again, speculating, but the guy parked exotic cars in the garage that went with the house,
Yeah.
and he put arcades and movie theater, and he was speculating that there would be some uber rich person. My point is that a spec house doesn't inherently imply super cheap, builder grade,
Right.
like bare bones. It just implies you're speculating on someone's going to buy your particular house. Ours, for example, is a couple notches above several notches above a builder grade.
Right.
It's not the same as a how do you refer to like a low end starter home, like in a slur?
Well, just a starter home.
Yeah.
Classic 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,750 square feet. That's just sort of a standard cookie cutter idea of what you would build to maximize the size of your pool of potential buyers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that want a house like that. And there is a single digit number of people that want a $50 million house with a Ferrari in the garage already.
In fact, I think it was on the market for years.
Yeah. Okay.
I wonder how the guy did on it. I don't know, but geez, no thanks for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you tell the viewers just your history with spec houses? Have you done these before? What's the general?
Yeah.
This is not your first rodeo.
It's not my first rodeo, but I do not have miles of experience in building and selling houses. When I was a kid, when I was Nate's age, I was sure that I would build a lot of houses on a speculation basis and sell them. Well, life didn't work that way. I ended up building a lot of other things and remodels and additions and providing a service to people to build the things they wanted rather than building and selling my own property. But the one guy that I know that absolutely fulfilled that dream, and it kind of is a dream, from a carpenter's perspective, or at least a carpenter like me, it is sort of the ideal way to use your skill set. Building a house the way you want to build it, to the market that you want to sell to, making all your own decisions, sailing under your own flag, and then sell it, clean deal, build another. That's ideal. And the only guy that I know...
So, to cut in, reading between the lines, doing the work without a customer to please.
Yes.
On a day in, day out
That's
basis.
right. You're not pleasing anybody but the building inspector and whoever your lender is.
Yeah.
The one man that I know well that's done that is Steve Hood. You've met him on the channel. Steve has stayed right here in this small town, and I'd love to have him on here, but he's so quiet. He's kind of an shy, introverted guy. I just don't think he could do it.
We'll pry it out of him.
We'll pry it out of him, because if Steve said something about building a mid-level, an entry-level spec house, you ought to listen to him, because he really knows. But personally, I have built and sold 2 houses in Las Vegas. I have bought, remodeled, and sold 8 houses, and then I've built a long string of other things for other people.
Yeah.
But as far as my own houses to build and sell, really, this is number 3.
Yeah, but spec, we started by saying spec could be a lot of things, but it's kind of not. Spec really implies buying the land, building from the ground up, punching in the utilities, never moving in.
Yeah.
And all of the other things that people and tradesmen do, flips and remodels, and are also deals, but that's not. It shouldn't be mistaken as a spec. A spec is its own animal.
That's right. The 2 houses that I did in Las Vegas, as a young man, I used what I perceived to be the advantage of having to live somewhere anyway, and having a mortgage payment anyway, to buy the ground, build the house, move my family in, and then when I was ready, sell that house to do it again. I mean, lots and lots of people have done that. It was interesting that I was never able to take a long enough view at the timing of the economic cycles, and I always ended up building just past the peak, and then occupying as it went into the slow period, and selling at the end of the slow period, usually before it got back to the peak. So I was always 180 out, but I still had the wonderful experience of building the house and sort of getting that hard education.
Did you make money on those houses?
I thought I was making some money, but in fact, the short answer is yes, I sold them for more than it cost me to build them. But in the rearview mirror, when I think about the effort of finding the deal, building it, moving in, living there for a period of time, selling it, and then needing to move out into interim housing and doing it again, that was hard.
Yeah.
The reason that tradesmen do that, or one of the things that has been built into our tax structure, is if you build a house and live in it for 2 years, there's no capital gains tax on the gain. Now that's appealing. If capital gains is 20%, is it 20% now?
I think it's 15 or 10, but it's still a lot.
It's still a lot. And when I was doing it, it was about 20.
And if you sell it in less than a year, I think it's ordinary income.
It's ordinary income.
So then you're really paying tax.
Then you're paying real taxes on it. So I thought I was being smart to sort of shelter from that. And maybe it was. I always made a little money on remodeling and improving and adding on to houses, but it never really. I never made it click the way some guys did. But I got a lot of great experience, right?
How did you finance those houses? Because it's not cheap, and for most kind of right off the job site framers, putting together, the cash to frame build a house is not easy.
Yeah,
for anybody, it's not easy.
It's not easy. So I had leveraged buying and remodeling and upgrading and selling some houses into some equity. So I started with that.
You put together a little bit of cash.
I put together enough cash to buy the lots, usually. And that's not easy. It's not easy to get to that point.
Right.
And then with the title to the lot in hand, a construction loan can be had if you can find somebody that'll bet on a young tradesman who maybe doesn't have a general contractor's license, but you can convince a loan officer that you actually can build the house. I think I used savings and loans both times, actually. They were a little easier to deal with. And they had a thing where they would roll over from construction financing to long-term financing for very little additional money, very few points. They were friendly, But a construction loan is a hard thing to get. Yeah. And I don't blame banks for being spooky about construction loans.
Yeah.
Because think of it, you've loaned money on a project and some young guy has convinced you he can do it, and he spent a bunch of money on framing and a bunch of money on roofing, and maybe the windows are in it, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason or combination of reasons, he's gone or upside down or you can't find him, and now the bank is holding the title to a piece of ground that has a partially built structure with who knows how many material liens or mechanics liens, how encumbered the title is to that property. And what's partially built is actually not an asset, but it's a liability.
Yeah.
It has no value until it has a certificate of occupancy issued on it. And so it's a tough loan to get sometimes.
I wonder how those loans are these days after our real estate bubble of 2005 and 6. And I wonder if it's got to be more tough now, but I haven't heard of anybody doing this in a long time. I wonder. I'm sure it's no easier now than it was then.
Can't be any easier.
And it wasn't easy then.
Was not easy then. Yeah.
Plus, that adds in another inspector to the whole job, right?
Does the bank it depends on your lender.
Okay.
It depends on your lender. So, sometimes there's a very elaborate system of a little escrow account is set up, and the money is put in the escrow account, and the draws are made and have to be authorized by the lender, and it's such a pain doing that. It's so that gets back to the beauty of a situation that. Well, like the house we're building right now, we're not dealing with a lender, and it's easy to overlook or take for granted how much easier it makes it. But Steve Hood got to the point where he didn't have to struggle with lenders, and it just streamlines the whole process.
The requirements they can put on of every person who works, they need to see every insurance certificate and licensing thing, and that's fine, except for the obvious fact that when you're young and trying to make money on it, maybe you want to go there with your wife and paint to save money. And the bank, that could be some kind of, I don't know, but maybe that's some kind of violation of their contract.
The bank will not, in my experience, the bank is not going to pay you for the work you do to build the house that you're borrowing the money from them to move into. They're not going to do it. And so you're doing it to save the money, but there's no way your cash flow suffers, when you're doing that. And it's not an exaggeration to say that the deck is stacked against that first-time home builder. It's just hard. And if you have if you have an uncle or somebody who will help you, that's great. But you got to be gentle on your uncle, because that money's important to him too, and he may need that for his retirement or when he's, when his hair is gray. And so you're stepping into a much bigger league when you start doing that.
Were there, when you did those 2 spec houses, were there parts of the process that you were kind of fuzzy on or learning as you went? Or did you kind of have a fully developed, grasp of how these things happened by that time?
I did not have a fully developed grasp. But I knew I had become friends with the guys on the job site who were doing side hustle electricians, side hustle plumbers, side hustle HVAC guys just like me with different areas of expertise, and I trusted them. I relied on them, and I picked their brain mercilessly, and I brought them over there, and I they would work there in the evenings and give me a boost and lay me out so I could do part of the work. So I compensated for my lack of experience with the experience of my friends on the job sites.
Yeah. Separate from learning and mastering your trade and picking up side hustles and side work, there's just learning how to run a business and operate a business that is a skill set that some people either have or develop.
It's a short step to go from a journey level plumber to somebody with a license, a specialty license, and now you are a plumber and you've got a truck and you've got your business license and you have your name in the yellow pages or online or however you market now. And instead of making, in today's dollars, I'll say $28 to $35 an hour working for a plumber, you're making $75 to $125 an hour as the plumbing contractor. And so lots of, particularly the mechanical tradespeople and drywallers and roofers, end up making that step.
Yeah.
It's interesting, looking at it from the outside as a carpenter or welder, it often happens, though, in electrical and plumbing that guys remain contented to be just an electrician and a plumber because you make pretty good money. But drywallers and roofers don't make much money. And so if you ever want to have money, you've got to be entering into the deals with the owners and actually making something.
Now, maybe kind of to wrap this up, let's swing it back to our spec house. And the viewers know this, but this isn't a typical spec house because we're not overly concerned with selling it and making a big profit. I mean, it'd be nice, but
it would be nice.
We're hoping to just come away with the videos intact and have that was the speculative portion of this house. But we did kind of make a few mistakes. If I could go back, I don't know if we would, and I don't know if you feel different, but I think the house is maybe a little more complicated than we needed to do for to make the point to teach about building a house.
Yeah.
Lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, between the complicated aspect, the size of the house, and the constraint of the lot, it was a challenging mouthful for sure.
And I'm sure a lot of people have been in this situation in other parts of their life. It's called biting off more than you can chew.
That's it. It's what it's
and
called.
The reason you bite it off is because it makes sense. You think you can handle it. You want to eat it or digest it or whatever. Yeah. And it's an easy mistake to make. I'm glad that we didn't do a how to develop a 400 house, 30 acre site. That would be a much bigger mouthful. So
I mean, that's such a great metaphor, right? Biting off more than you can chew. You only bite it off because it smells good and it tastes good and you're hungry. It's why you bite it off. And you just can't help it. I mean, it's there and you bite it off and you realize, wow, I don't know if I'm going to get this down or not. And it was never that for us on this house in context of the work or the house. But the combination of the filming and the editing and the time commitment and the emotional cost of the channel along with the house, I think we underestimated.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Although we're going through the videos now from last summer. I think the roofing video is being put together as we speak, and that was happening in early November. That's not 6 months ago, but it's 5 months ago, I guess. And I think in a couple years, once it's all said and done, like most things that are really hard and difficult, when you look back at it, it doesn't seem quite like that big a deal, and you kind of remember the good parts, and the parts that are not as fun seem to fade away easier and quicker, and that's a good thing. Thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness for that, or the population of each family would be one child, right?
Yeah. So since we spoke about tradesmen, let's just wrap up on this, because I know we have listeners who are young tradesmen right now, and there is some romance in working with your hands and building wood, but for the most part, it's not that fun. And I know a lot of guys in the trades are kind of actively paying attention to find a way to, if not move out of the trades, at least make a living without breaking their back. They would rather weld in their house and build go-karts for fun than, day in, day out. So what do you say to those guys about, taking on a speculative venture, whether it's side jobs, a spec house, a business? What do you say to those young guys who are trying to decide how they get out of the sort of hamster wheel of being in the trades?
Hamster wheel indeed. So the first thing is you're right to want to make more money because probably you're worth more money, and it's a cinch that your family needs more money, but you've got to be a little careful of that because there's no end. There's never enough. There is never a time when anybody ever says, I'm making enough money. Yeah. Now that's not exactly true. I mean, I've heard that there are people who say that, but it's a hard thing to ever say that. It's an easy thing to think I have to make more. So yes, you got to make more money, and there's only a couple ways to do that, and both of them they all involve producing more work and taking on more responsibility. I mean, that's how it happens. So you have to be realistic about what your skill sets are. For instance, if you don't kind of enjoy or at least tolerate well balancing your checkbook, you're probably not going to be a good businessman unless you learn.
Nobody balances a checkbook anymore.
Well, metaphorically speaking. I mean, keeping track, right?
Yeah.
Keeping track. If you don't like to keep track, if you don't like to line things up financially, if you can't, so how would it be described now?
Well, I know the point you're making. I would say the point you're making, save money.
Well, that'd be the next thing.
Keep track. And
if you can't keep track of your money, you're not going to save any money.
Yeah.
And if you never save any money, you're never going to be able to get any freedom to do anything except what you're doing. That's the big thing, is that you have to find a way to save enough money to buy your own freedom. That's how people have always bought their way out of slavery.
Yeah.
Is with money. And the easiest way to start buying your way out of slavery is to reduce your overhead, which means if you've got a payment on a new truck, you probably can't afford it. And so get real straight in your mind about what cars are. All they are is a way to get you from home to work and work to home and home to church or home to the ball game or home to wherever you go. They just get you around from point A to point B, and if you let them, they will impoverish you. So reduce your overhead. Find a way to save some money or at least minimize expenses. Find a way to be focused on keeping track, keeping your ducks in a row so that your bills are paid on time, however you balance your checkbook. Yeah. You got to be able to pay your bills on time. You have to, if you do those things, if you make habits of those things, you're going to be able to find a way out of the hamster wheel.
Yeah, that saving money, balancing your checkbook, all that is, I think it's a little bit underrated these days. And I'm thinking about all these startups in our day and age. You hear about big investment getting put into these startups and people finding investors and all this kind of thing. And I really feel like that has kind of tainted the way people think about starting a business. And I know a lot of that is because they're big tech operations and they need millions of dollars. But you hear about people who kind of think about even their small contracting business that way, like someone needs to invest so that I can do this. As opposed to if you were able to save, let's say, $5,000 over the course of a couple of years or whatever, that might be all it actually takes. Because if that can buy you 2 months, let's say, of getting by without a paycheck, that a lot of times is kind of all it takes. And so now you're not relying on an investment from an uncle or anything else. You're kind of just buying your own time. And so my point is, and it's served me and Allie well, that saving money and being kind of frugal. And then maybe the last thing that I could think of would just be being patient in general, because I know when I was younger, and still in a lot of ways, but you just instinctually think that you kind of need things now, and whether it's success or this business or whatever, like it's got to kind of happen right now. And it just doesn't work that way.
It does not.
You got to be patient. You got to kind of wait, and it might take years. And when the moment arises, that's when you take your shot. And it's easy to sort of get a little skittish, thinking like, I got to do something right now, and then kind of go off half cocked. And that's an easy way to make a mistake.
So true. There's a cliche that says life is what happens while you're making other plans. And it is so easy to get caught up in just what Nate's talking about, sort of a fever. I got to do something. And all the while, your life's going by.
Yeah.
And if, on the other hand, you can push it a little further into the back of your mind and say, I've got to do something when the right moment presents itself, not I've got to do something now.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if you're keeping your overhead down, keeping your standard of living down, living below your means, that is, don't have the nicest house or nicest apartment or nicest car that you can possibly afford, but have the situation that will enable you to have some measure of contentment and save some money, then when the deal comes along, you'll be ready to do something instead of standing there with your hands tied with a debt burden that you can't hold up. So that's the easiest way, because you're learning something at work. You're learning a service that people need. You'll be ready to sell that to the highest bidder if you can step away from the subsistence level income that you have now on a payroll and step out and be your own man. But that takes some money.
Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. If you have questions or comments, YouTube is the place on our second channel there. You have any last-minute items of business for the listeners or anything before we sign off? We're just for let the record show, we are in a social distance quarantine world, and it's bizarre. And it's nice to talk about something besides that, but let the record show this is a weird time.
and if you're stuck at home and you're not able to go to work and your money is all going out and nothing's coming in and you don't know how you're going to make it, you're going to make it.
Yeah.
I mean, the sun's going to come out again. There's going to be some turbulence. Who knows how turbulent? But just keep learning something, and just keep watching for the right pitch. And when the right pitch comes by, you're going to hit it. But don't waste your energy swinging at the bad pitches.